Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. here, member of the steering committee for Dad Central for Ontario. And Dad Central is Canada's national fatherhood organization. And we're glad to have you here, whether you're watching this live or on the replay. Another one of our monthly conversations that is co-sponsored by Dove Men Care. Big shout out to them. And for where we are in the province of Ontario today, it's the first day of school for the kids. And we were supposed to do this broadcast a few weeks ago, but I think nothing just happens. Today is just a great day to do this topic today. And the topic we're going to be chatting about with these three esteemed young gentlemen is keys to help dads balance work, family, and health. And based on what's happened over the last 16 months and it being the first day of school, no better day to have it. So before we get into deep conversation and roundtable here, I'd like to introduce my co-man, my leader in the Dad Central train, the conductor, Drew Solon. What's up, Drew?
Hey, Ed, thanks so much. As always, it's a pleasure just to be able to sit down, have these conversations, and engage with these topics that I think are relevant to dad. So as far as school, yeah, right in the thick of it. We've actually had 2 days of school. Today is day 3 of school. So
wow, okay.
And not without their challenges, but it's all part of the learning and growth process for our kids, and I guess for me as a dad in supporting them through it. So just from my perspective, Dad Central, just to remind everybody, if you're not familiar with us, our focus is on helping equip dads to be positively involved in the lives of their kids. And of course, we support family service organizations who are working with families. They want to see dads more involved. They want to support families and ultimately want to help healthy child development. And the way you do that is through engaging fathers and helping them be more positively involved in the lives of their kids. And so I think it's a great privilege for us to be able to serve both, fathers and families directly, but also to be able to serve organizations who are serving families and who have a need to help fathers in the process. So I'm really excited to be able to hopefully hit a topic that is as you said, timely and relevant. And, based on the research that we have, it's one of the challenges. It's one of the big 3, I'd say, that dads face is how do you manage everything? And so I'm certainly in the thick of it. I know Justin and Paul are as well, but I've learned from both of them. So I'm excited to actually hear what they have to say today. I'll contribute a little bit, but I'd love to learn in the process and hopefully support our audience as they're listening. So thanks, Ed.
My pleasure. Well, let's introduce our 2 friends. One is not a new friend. He was on last year. Like, I think he was on one of our first broadcasts last year, and he's only amplified the great work he's been doing since then. Like, I can honestly say I knew him when online. Now it's like book this, all this other stuff. So Justin, welcome back to the platform. How are you doing? And what's going on in your world?
Yeah, no, Ed and Drew, I appreciate you inviting me on. Feeling grateful and blessed to be able to share this space with everyone today, and just looking to share some experiences, a little bit of wisdom, and leave people better off than when they got here.
Wonderful. That is fantastic. And Paulatia, we met last month for a few seconds. And now we're going to get a little bit more of you. And jokingly, I said to Paul beforehand, are you outside? Because the first time I met him digitally, he was outdoors. I was hoping to, especially today in the Ontario area, the weather is beautiful. I was expecting to get some sunshine, etc., but he's gone indoors on us today. But welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Justin. I'm really excited to be here. It's a really important topic, and obviously, none of us would be here today if fatherhood didn't mean a ton to us. So I'm honored and grateful to be here and happy to share some of the lessons that I've learned, sometimes the easy way, sometimes the hard way, many from others. Yes. I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really wise people around me who've given me some good mentorship and advice. And I'm in the thick of the journey myself. And I think this is great. Shared community to share ideas is really important. So thanks. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
If I knew, by the way, that staying outdoors was an option, I would have stayed outdoors. That's okay. Well, Drew didn't tell me that.
No, Drew's in charge, so that would have been. I don't know. So maybe next time
I
But
should
next
have
time we'll have you outdoors.
I should have read the small print. Okay, next time. Indoors for today.
The next one.
All right, the next one. No, okay, that's good. Well, folks, for those who are watching live, yeah, please chime in with questions, comments. We're having a just good conversation here in regards to this word balance. But I'm going to start off the first conversation piece. What does work-life balance mean to you? And I'm going to add a little caveat because you knew that this question was coming, but I'm going to add this caveat. What did it mean to you a year and a half ago? And what does it mean to you now? So before pandemic, and now we're still in a pandemic, not as intense, but how, what does it mean to you? Has it changed in the last year and a half? Who'd like to jump in first?
Justin, go for it. You're up.
Okay. When I think pre this last 18 months, I would say that this idea of balance is an illusion, right? It's this idea that even a rocket fails its way to the moon. So it's coming with the understanding that, challenges, setbacks, obstacles will pop up in the game of life, right? Like health, career, relationships, business, all those things will pop up. But it's really just understanding that in any moment, you can always create this reset, right? To get back on the path. And I think it's really important, especially in this day and age, because there are so many distractions, right? We're trying to wear 17 different hats all at once that really, it's really about stopping, thinking, asking yourself a question and taking it one great thought and action at a time. And I think that that's really been the biggest lesson for me in the last 18 months.
Cool.
So I'll take the bait next. I mean, in response to your question, which is, what does balance or work life or life balance mean to me now versus before the pandemic? I would say the meaning of it is the same. The application of it has changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that in and of itself is probably the most important, takeaway, which is your situation in life for all of us will always be changing. It's never going to be static. It'll appear static for a little bit, but it's not. And it's our capacity to adapt to our new surroundings and then adhere to the principles that we set for ourselves. So I often say, anyone can sort of run or anyone can bike fast in a straight line, right? Anyone can high five their teammates when you're winning. Anyone can sort of have the right type of balance that they want and live sort of the way they want to live when things are going your way at all times. The reality is that's a really rare circumstance. So it's really our capacity to do that when things change, when things go unexpectedly during difficult times. And so, to sort of your root question, which is what is balance? I've always thought about it this way. It's a finite, time is a finite resource. Everything in life comes down to time. Right. And all of our lives are based upon that. And I think the earlier in life that we can recognize how finite time is, and it's finite for, it's sort of a unique concept. It's limited for all of us. None of us are going to, be here forever. But the other thing is, unlike sort of a bank account or unlike other things that we think, I've only got X amount in my bank account, we don't actually know how much time we have left. So you're sort of playing this game where A, it's finite, and B, it's an unknown endpoint. And so our capacity to recognize that and then live a certain way where we actually maximize our time in the way we want to. So to answer your question, what does balance mean to me? To me, it's like, will I look back upon my decisions and be proud of how I made my decisions? So when I'm 75, when I'm 85, will I look back and say, this is how I spent my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s? Will I look back and say, you know what? I wasn't perfect, because to Justin's point, we'll never be perfect. But can I look back and say, you know what? The decisions that I made with respect to how I allocated this resource are decisions that I'm grateful for and that I stand by today. So that principle existed, in March 2020, and that principle exists today. The application of it has changed radically for all of us, and it's going to change again. So, COVID provided a great opportunity for us to test our capacity to take our principles being applied in one framework and then now have to reapply them in a new one. It's certainly a challenge, but that's what balance has meant to me pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Cool. Drew, do you want to add in?
Not much to add to, I think, what they both said. Maybe something slightly different. Just And it's related, but not exactly, I'll say, directly to your pre-post pandemic question, maybe more the idea of balance. And so I think similar to Justin's comment, viewing balance as kind of the ideal is, I think it's off. I think what you do is especially when you think, oh, it's work, it's life, it's health, what you're doing is setting things off. And I think adversarial relationships, I have to have one at the expense of another. And so similar to the principles that I think Paul's referring to there is that when you start to look at them as these separate entities, you're missing the point, because work is part of our life, health is part of our life, relationships are part of our life. It's how do you integrate all of those, and to Paul's point about make decisions that align with what's relevant or important or part of what you want to achieve. And so, what balance might look like for Paul might be very different than what it looks like for me, might be very different than what it looks like from you. But if it's related to my goals, the things that are the priorities that I have established in my life, and with that whole idea of this, it's constantly changing, I can make decisions that in real time that are going to be as relevant and as helpful in moving me closer to what I want to achieve, that may be very different than the person who's next to me. And so that's the other part that comes in. Is we also get sometimes caught in this idea of comparing. Well, look at so-and-so's life. It looks so fantastic. It's great. Like, that's what I want. Well, okay, if that's what you want, what do you need to do to get there? And identify for yourself, you're starting with your priorities, and how are you allocating your time, as what Paul said, in a way that's going to actually move you closer to achieve that, with a recognition you're going to have to maybe adjust. And there will be seasons or periods of time where you're maybe actually not overextending yourself, but you're investing a little bit more in one area because it's part of an intended goal, and you've incorporated all those other areas of your life to be able to accommodate that at the time that's necessary. So I think, if you have the right mindset of, it's not about these adversarial relationships, how do they integrate? You're in a better place. And then, you recognize that it's making decisions that are relevant to you and not being influenced by everything else, you and your family or the people who are most important to you. That's kind of my add-on to their great answer.
For someone who said they didn't have a lot to add on, that was a really good add-on, Drew. That was well done, right?
Sometimes I talk too much.
No. You're good. Well, a number of great knowledge bombs already dropped amongst the many. Like, I love the fact that Justin said reset. And also, Paul, I'm a firm believer. I say time never lost a fight. So you can't beat time. It never loses a fight. So I think great things already dropped here. I want to ask each one of you at this time, how satisfied are you with your current work-life balance?
I'll start off.
Yeah.
I don't always want to be last after those two. So, I mean, to Paul's point, life's constantly changing. I've had a significant amount of change in my life over the last 6 months. In terms of satisfied, I feel that I feel very, I'll say, proud of how I am navigating the challenges and the changes that I'm going through, and that I feel that I'm integrating the elements of my life that are most relevant to me, such as my faith, my health, my mental health, emotional health, my family, my finances. I feel like I'm navigating all of these critical pieces in the best way that I can, given the scenario that I'm dealing with. And so I actually feel pretty good. I am fortunate that, most of my work is from this space here. So I have the, less of a commute than I've had in the past. I have the ability to sort of connect and engage again through this virtual medium to deliver content, to add value to people, to coach people. So I feel very fortunate and grateful for sort of, as I go through this period of time, that I'm managing it as best as I can. Not without challenges, not without some hardships, not without difficulty, but I'm doing it and investing in the areas that are important to me.
Cool. Who want to go next?
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think for me, I think Paul was mentioning the idea of the power of questions, right? Like, can you ask yourself those tough questions? Like, you give yourself that space. And for me, what I've really learned from one of my mentors is this idea of, in any situation in life, ask yourself 2 questions. What am I doing well? What can I do a better job of? And for me, that relates back to that Nelson Mandela quote. I never lose. I either win or I learn. So why those two questions have been so powerful for me are, one, they allow me to objectively ask, right? And Drew has mentioned, like, we are conditioned to judge, right? It's just it's a habit that we've picked up. So I find that by asking those questions, that allows me to reset. Now, do I do it perfectly? No. But I find when I'm most consistent with that habit, that is where I feel the most satisfied and fulfilled with my life. So right now, had a great start to the morning, feeling really grateful and blessed. But again, it's because I've framed my day by asking that question.
Okay. So are you saying, sorry, before I jump in. So you're saying that it's intentional. Intentionality comes up in the process.
Yeah. And for me, that's the power of habit, right? Is can you frame your day with the habits that allow you to just put you in that state, that winning feeling that allows you to then go about the rest of your day in all areas of your life. Like Drew said, talk about integrating.
Right. Okay. Sorry, Paul, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, not at all. No, it's great to hear Drew and Justin. And I like the two questions and just sort of the ability to ask ourselves questions. So I think it's really important. So two sort of things that are related, but obviously separate for the purposes of answering your question, Ed, in terms of how would I assess how I'm doing now? Like, am I satisfied with my current management of, you're calling it balance, I'm going to call it my current management of time. Okay. I would say, to be quite candid, I would say I'm at certainly not an all-time low, but I'm certainly at a lower point than A, I normally would be at, and B, than I'd like to be. I have found managing life during COVID to be extremely difficult. I have 5 young kids. So they're between, we had 4 kids in 4 years. We call them the big 4. So they are between sort of 7 and 11, almost 8 and 12. And then we went for the victory lap. So we have a 4-year-old, and it's great. Obviously, I like all dads, I love my children, and they're amazing. Nothing I do in this world is tougher, and nothing I do in this world is more rewarding than being a dad, right? So it is single-handedly the hardest thing I do, the most important thing I do, the thing that takes me to places I never thought I'd go, both good and bad, right? Like the emotions you feel as a dad. I've never had greater sort of joy than, of course, being a dad in those moments with your kids. And to be quite candid, I've never had more rage or resentment or frustration or all those things. And I think if people say that they don't feel that, then maybe you need to dive in a little deeper, because it's there, right? Let your kids test you and take it to a new limit, or test your limits and find out where they are. So when I look at COVID, and we could deep dive on this all day, but the reality is the world went and is still going through a tornado. And what you're trying to do is figure out what the new normal is. And the new normal in COVID has obviously changed every week, right? Like, we don't actually know what it is. And that's just true. And everyone's had life events happen. Drew's had major life happens. Others have had, a business event. We bought and sold a house during this and had that happen. I had business challenges. Everyone's had their own tornado occurring in the midst of the tornado. And some of those tornadoes have been voluntary ones that we've chosen, and some of them have been involuntary that have come upon you. Mm-hmm. But either way, you're constantly looking for what's the new norm. And our kids are looking for that too. For me, the hardest challenge in terms of balance, back to your original question, is this: I'm around my children much more than I had originally set my life up to be. So we put these systems into place, and this is true for all of us, right? So we have an ecosystem, and an ecosystem gets into some form of balance where, okay, I work out in the morning, I work during the day, I do this in the evening, whatever it is. And we're not perfect, but you sort of got dialed in. And now suddenly, for me, I've got 5 kids who are home, 5 kids who are in school, all that, and they're around you all the time. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I have found most challenging from that, and it's upsetting, is I've actually spent more time with my kids, obviously in the past 18 months, but I've rejected spending time with them more in the past 18 months, because the opportunity for them to spend time with me has gone up, a billion-fold. Mm-hmm. So it used to be I'd spend time with them in the morning and the evening, and I wasn't rejecting them so often. Now, all of a sudden, every time I walk out of my home office to the kitchen, or I head downstairs to the gym, or I walk outside to lift, whatever it is that I'm doing, there's one of 5 kids, very often more, who want my attention. Dad, can you look at this for a second? And I'm like, I'm saying no. And it's a long story, but I'm like, when I'm thinking and I'm in my zone, I literally block out the rest of the world. And so if I'm walking to the kitchen to, like I said, make a coffee, I'm literally in that zone of whatever's in my head. And when someone stops to talk to me, I'm almost angry that someone's interrupting my thought process. Right. And so anyway, so all that to say, I don't think in 18 months I've figured out the new norm yet. I've tried different things. I've worked, it sort of to Justin's question, what have I done well? Yes. When I look back, and I do try to grade myself. So it sounds silly, but I keep a journal. So I track.
No, nothing wrong with that. That's good.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
I track, I track a bunch of qualitative things in my life, and I track a bunch of quantitative things. So, so I track all my fitness stuff. I very often track my workouts. Obviously I track work. And then qualitative things I'll track as well. So all that to say, to answer your first question, I would say it's been tough. I would say my current management of time is not where I want. I either work too much or I work too little, right? So I work too little and I have a great time with my kids and I'm exercising lots. And I'm like, oh, this is great, man. I mountain bike for 3 hours and I hang out with the kids. And then all of a sudden it's like 7 p.m. I'm like, shoot, I send those 4 emails and I'm stressed. You know what I mean? Yep. And then I'll have like, okay, I got to catch up on work, and then I'll do that. And then I'm like, man, I caught up on work and I got my workouts in, but I sort of didn't even see my family this week. Right. And so anyway, all of that is normal. COVID just took it and dialed it up because you had many more opportunities, I would say, for failure and many more opportunities for victory. And so your batting average changes. Yeah. The second thing though, and this is sort of, this is part of the answer, I think, and relevant to this conversation in general. I mentioned at the beginning, I've been really fortunate to have really good people around me. Part of that has been just pure dumb luck, and part of that has been willful seeking of good people, right? And obviously anyone who's on this call or who's listening knows that you have to go out and find good mentors and find good people to be around and say, teach me, I want to learn from you. So I'm really fortunate. I have an amazing example in my own father. And I have an amazing example in my father-in-law, who I admire for a whole host of reasons. But one of the things that, I've picked his brain a lot, and he has a framework they use that has made a massive difference in my life. And it's simply this: life is much more sailboat than motorboat. And I think about that all the time, and I use it probably every day. I use it in work. I use it in my own life. I use it with others. And this idea of sailing, not that I'm a nautical wizard, I'm not, but I get the gist of it. In sailing, you have to do a couple of things simultaneously. You have to, one, have an awareness of where you are, right? So you have to actually know where you are relative to, the ocean or the lake or wherever it is you're sailing in. Number two, you have to know where you are relative to the item that you're, the island that you're getting to. And then what you have to do is you have to look at the winds and the waves and figure out what they're doing. And then you have to adapt and adjust your sails and your rudder accordingly. So I always think every single day I have to be sailing, which means I have to look at, where am I relative to where I want to be, and then adapt. So I know, and I'll be controversial here for a second, we're using the word reset. I'm actually not. Reset to me connotates like sort of a hit zero again. I prefer adapt, right? So every day I have to adapt. And this principle of life as a sailboat is relevant to, how much money is the right amount of money to spend? The answer is it depends, right? Like, what should I spend on a house? It depends. What are your goals? How much time should I work out today? How much time should I do? All of the answers to all of those questions, if we're intellectually honest, are it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and what your day is like. So even Drew's comment earlier when he says, and I think Drew's bang on right, when he says he has to look at work-life balance as it relates to his life, not, Justin's or Paul's or Ed's or anyone else listening. I think that's totally true. And I would even add one more caveat, which is his life at that particular moment. Because Drew's balance, 6 months ago is probably not going to be the same as what's required today. The ecosystem is perpetually changing and we have to adapt to it. So a long-winded way to say, I'm currently not hitting, where I want to be, but that's okay because life is a sailboat. So I'm continually checking the winds and the waves, and I'm hopefully going to be adjusting accordingly as we all go forward.
Great. Anyone want to add before we move on to the next conversation topic?
I'll just quickly add on
Go ahead.
Paul's comments around the adaptability piece. I think there's also going with the sailing analogy, there's also the recovery, right? So let's say you make a bad decision, you misjudge some of the wind and the waves, and you realize, wow, we're off course. You got to recover. And so adapting is one, but then there's also, because you can beat yourself up. As an example, you're not happy with where you're not saying you're beating yourself up, but I think dads in general will beat themselves up, like not where I'm supposed to be. Like you're looking at the scoreboard. It's not the way I want it. And it can be counterproductive if you don't look at it as how do I recover faster, right? And focus on, beating yourself up. And I think that's where we sometimes trip ourselves up, and we actually restrict our ability to recover faster or adapt better when we get stuck in that. And so that's just my only common piece is work on improving your recovery time, right? Just like in terms of, let's say, a fitness goal, let's say, it would be great to be able to go back to back to back to back, and you can, but you need to be able to train and have the proper recovery time to be able to do that. So don't, anyways.
No, I just to add to that, I think that's totally accurate. And I think, and obviously I want to hear from Justin on this too, but this idea of beating yourself up. I mean, Drew and I go way back and played sports together. He's really tough on himself. I'm really, certainly as athletes who were.
I know that Drew's tough on himself too.
Totally. And, and that's it's born of a good place, which is that you want to be a perfectionist. You want to be excellent in what you do. So all that, and like any asset, it can become a liability when not managed properly. And so two things on that I've learned over the past few years that have been really, really helpful. So one is, and this is a football one, but the greatest cornerbacks, the greatest quarterbacks, they have selective amnesia. They have the ability to get burned on a play, to throw a pick or to let a touchdown be scored on you. And I'm sure this applies to every other sport. I think Michael Jordan had it probably in spades. Literally the ability to make a mistake and disappoint your teammates and then not let it affect you the next play. And that is a phenomenal gift. And I think, at least the way I was almost like, oh, I made a mistake, therefore I have to go through some sort of penance. Like I'm not allowed to, and the reality is the people who perform best are able to make mistakes and recover quickly. The best framework that I heard from that is actually from Ray Dalio in his book Principles. And he describes it this way: pain plus reflection equals progress. So pain plus reflection equals progress. And so that, I was sort of reminded by that by you, Drew, because you don't ignore your mistakes or you don't ignore why you got off course. I think we actually have to look at it and experience and assess it and say, okay, here's, I did the following things and, it led to this pain of disappointment, this pain of regret, whatever. I think we need to acknowledge that and be honest, and then we need to reflect upon it, and then we learn and we grow. So it's not this like beat myself up and wallow in the pain, but it's also not ignore the obvious, which is I just made a huge mistake and I'm experiencing pain on account of it. It's like we have to be honest about it. And I try to teach my kids that. And I'm trying to teach myself to do that all the time. It's really helpful to hear that from Ray Dalio and from others and to try to put it into practice.
Justin, you want to add anything to the conversation that's gone on for the last few minutes?
Yeah, no, I love that idea of what, that idea of pain plus reflection. And I know from my experience, learning how to flex my perception muscle has been huge in my life, right? Because like Paul was saying, ambitious, driven people like any of us, right? People watching this, right? Like this isn't, you obviously have some level of interest in growth if you're here on a Thursday morning at 11 a.m., right? Watching there. But how can you harness that? And I really look at that idea of it is really easy sometimes to get into that judgment mode, right? To judge ourselves, to judge others, right? And I think we all understand that. But quickly, how can you create that shift back with that, right? By flexing that perception muscle. So, for example, if you find yourself, when I find myself, maybe it's a judgment of what someone else is thinking or what they said, how quickly can I focus back to the blessings in my life? So again, like Paul said, catching that awareness, catching that, hey, that judgment, not judging yourself, but being objective. Okay, how do I create that focus on a blessing? Oh, you know what? I'm really grateful that it's 19 degrees and sunny in here in Ontario. So I find that ability to really use that muscle, that perception muscle has been huge in this transition, especially in the last 18 months as the kids have been home more and it just, there's just more on the plate sometimes.
Good stuff. Just want to read some of the comments here. Christopher was asking, and Paul answered it for you. I think Christopher is saying, how do you manage adult time with kids? I have a lot of kids and it's hard to manage time have a break between work and parenting. So I think Paul gave a real deep dive, unless Paul wants to add anything else from his perspective.
Yeah, sure. The question is how to manage adult time, meaning time with your spouse or just time with your own?
And it was a question I was going to come up to, like, managing your balance with your partner or spouse during this crazy time of balance. I just want to, whoever wants to give input on that.
No, it's a really, really good question. And it's been a huge challenge for parents and for anyone in a relationship, which is craving time for yourself. So here's a great example, and we've all touched upon it, but it's Chris who brought the question in, I think, right? So I want to sort of answer Chris's question because it's a really valuable one. And I think it's something we're all struggling with in general. And again, COVID just poured gas on that fire, right? In terms of finding that time. So the answer comes down to something Justin said earlier, which is you have to be very deliberate about it. You have to be very, very intentional about it. If you wait, it's sort of like fitness. I remember writing this in an article a long time ago. You can choose once you become a dad to be a fit dad or a fat dad. Like you literally just have to sort of make your choice. And to choose not to make a choice is to make a choice, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning, stagnation is a choice of lack of action. And so you have to actually be very deliberate about it. And I think relationships are the same way, meaning our relationship with our spouse will not go stronger just over time. Like it's actually the opposite. We'll grow apart. And so we have to be very, very deliberate on actually saying, I want this relationship to grow. It's just like investing in your bank account. Like watching it sit there, won't grow as much as if I'm actively, doing something with it positively, right? And so with kids, and my wife and I have had to learn this just on our parenting journey, we've changed the time that we have set for ourselves to be with each other as our kids have gone through different stages. Right. So when they were first born, we put them to bed early so we could have our evenings together. The great news is we spent a lot of time together in the evenings. That apparently led to more babies. So that's good. Okay. So then all of a sudden, right? So then all of a sudden now, with a kid who's almost 12 and now in grade 7, our kids are now up till like 10 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? Like, so we don't have our evenings alone anymore. And so, it's either mornings or when they were in school, we would just say, we're going to meet for lunch today. Or we're going to have a coffee at 11 a.m. today because I work from home and I could do that. So you have to adapt. And so the short answer to Chris is you actually have to be very deliberate. If you simply say, hey, I'll catch up with you later will be 10 years later. Yep. And your relationship won't be the same, and you actually have to say, what time are we getting together? And the way I always, and I promise I'll wrap up this answer after this, but I think this is something that I learned that I saw in friends' marriages and saw on my own and really have to work deliberately on pushing through it. When you get together with your spouse and you're raising young kids, you're like two corporate managers running a business. So the first set of things you talk about are just details of day-to-day management. So it's, oh, hey, are you taking the kid to hockey? What time is this? And sorry, can you run to the grocery store? And did you pay that guy who cut the grass, right? Like you're literally just going back and forth on logistics, which is not at all a relationship. It's just transactional. So I find you have to be really deliberate about get through that stuff because you need to take care of it to run your household. But then you have to go to like what brought you together as friends, which is like, hey, how are you doing? By the way, how was your day? How's your sister doing? What's actually going on, right? How was your workout this morning? Okay, good. And then you have to really deep dive and you have to go back to what led you to date in the first place, which is like, wow, I really want to know who you are. And I really want to share something with you. And I find it is so hard to get to that second level and that third level when you are raising a young family. And so the only way it can be done is by being wildly deliberate about it and ignoring other things. You have to literally be okay with the kitchen dishes piling up to have an important conversation with the wife. You have to be okay to not watch the next episode on Netflix in order to do this. It's super challenging because it's so easy to want to go to sort of hit the low-hanging fruit on your to-do list. And this is arguably the most important one. So that's sort of my answer for Chris. The answer is being very deliberate and putting practices into place consistently.
Justin?
Yeah, I think Paul, hit the nail on the head, right? Got to be intentional, got to be deliberate. The 16th of the month, I'll just, use my wife and I as an example. That's date night. Like that's where we go out and we go do something. Like that's an intentional one, no ifs, ands, or buts. Peeling it back at even another layer, because I like what Paul said, as you grow, right, your awareness changes. I know for me, my love language is I just want her attention and her time. That's all. Like I could be sitting in a park with her, having a coffee and tea. I know with my wife, she likes things. So she likes to go out for, if I pick her up, her favorite chocolate, if we go out for dinner, right? So I think it's just really understanding each other and really what allows you to connect, and building off what Paul said, being deliberate with that and scheduling it like you would any important business meeting, anything in life. Doctor's appointment.
Drew, anything you'd like to add?
The last part that Justin said about connection, I think, is the key, and the intentionality piece. And so connection comes from knowing and understanding, what your partner values and ways that you can create that environment where they feel heard, they feel acknowledged, they feel cared for, they feel loved. And so that could be a simple, as you're walking by, a little hand on the shoulder and say, I really appreciated how you did this, this, and this with the kids. And I just want you to know, okay, have a great rest of your day. Little moments like that, the more you invest in those intentionally, can help build a connection. I think there's 3 A's: appreciation, acknowledgement, and affirmation, right? So those are 3 things I think are they're like air to a relationship, right? So say something you appreciate, acknowledge something that you've observed, and affirm a character trait or a skill in your partner. And I think those can build a connection. They can help you be very intentional, and they can allow the day-to-day moments of maybe hard to set aside specific time to still be added onto in a very positive way.
Cool. I'd like to have a success story from each one of you. Can you give an example when you knew your balance was out of whack? And what did you do to correct the situation? It can be something small, can be something big, something recent, something from the past. Can you give an example when your balance wasn't right, and what did you do to 180 it?
I'll hop in quickly and try and give a short example. This happened, I think, early on. We got 3 kids, twin 8-year-olds and a 5-year-old. So with twins, it was jump right into having kids and having to manage 2. And so I'd say within the first year, and my wife owned a business at the time as well. And so juggling 2 new kids, juggling my work, and I'd also was about to transition to a new role and her business. Life just felt a little bit crazy. And so what we did, or what I think I did, is we just set aside time to actually sit down and discuss and plan and talk through, what are our priorities? Like, we've got this family now, which we've been planning for. We've got, this blessing of twins. We never imagined this. But now we've kind of made it through the first craziness. Like, okay, what's happening? Where are we going? And so for us, it started with just sitting down and creating a list of what are our priorities. Okay. Then what does that look like in terms of our family? So it was very much, Justin referenced how you operate a business. It was more of the business of our family. So we had our values. We had our expectations in terms of how are we going to live those values out. We had sort of, these are the 5 areas that matter the most, and what are the things that we want? What are the goals that we have within these 5 areas for our family? And so it wasn't like a once and done, but it was setting aside the time to actually discuss these things, actually put them out on paper, display them in our house, and then begin to say, how can we start living these out more consistently, as opposed to feeling like we're just, going day to day.
It's good stuff. Who wants to follow up?
I'll go if you want. I've forced Justin to go quickly enough. So for me, it's I kind of it's not one specific example per se. Actually, I'll give one because I think it's emblematic. Probably one of the most important moments for me as a dad, and this goes back to this pain and reflection thing, was, and again, I said this a little bit earlier, our assets and our liabilities are very often the same thing, right? Your greatest asset and your greatest liability is very often the same trait. It's just how you allocate it and manage it. So I'm a pretty intense person, and that's served me well for most of my life, but it has its downsides. And so I remember one night when my kids were, we had 4 kids, we're at the dinner table, but I was very focused on work, and I have to do this, this, and this. And I was at dinner, but I wasn't really present at dinner. And I just remember, dinner sort of finishing, bath and bedtime sort of routine starting, and me thinking, no, I got to go work. I have to do this. And I had this task that I just had to get done. To be honest, I don't even remember what the task is, which obviously proves the point that at that moment, what I thought was the most important thing in the world is something I can't even remember. Mm-hmm. And I remember sort of making myself a coffee at like 6 p.m. because I'm all geared up and I'm ready to work. And I remember going outside to sip this coffee and hearing in the window of the house a noise that every father will know and every mother will know. And it brings us all to tears, which is that sound of your kids laughing. it was sort of like all the kids were inside. They were there with my wife and they were just howling. And you sort of get that contagious giggle of kids. And my wife was in there laughing and they were all just having this great time. And I'm just this idiot who's like outside, super focused on this task that I have to do that's so important. And I remember in that moment sort of thinking, and I was in my 30s at the time, I remember thinking, when I'm on my deathbed, what would I be willing to give to have this hour back? You know, like what would I be willing to give to sort of have this moment back? And I was like, wow, I would give anything to have this moment back. So I was like, all right, you know what do I really have to do tonight? Does it have to be tonight? You know, and just sort of going through that little questionnaire in my own head. And I went back inside and had a great time with my family. And I just remember ever since that moment, just always asking myself, what does the 85-year-old version of me tell me to do? You know, that was sort of the big lesson. Like that's how I sort of try to autocorrect that is, you know, if I want to be wise, I got to listen to me. That's 85, right? Because that's the person who's going to look back and tell me, you know, and it's not don't do your work at night, because there could have been the 85-year-old version of me could have said, no, you need to get this done. Like you're in court, you know, I was a trial lawyer at the time. You're in court tomorrow. You have to do a good job on this case. You need to ignore your family and go get your work done. That occurs, you know, but it was more so just making sure that as I hit these crossroads of how to allocate my time, where should I go? Because I'm blessed with the ability to have the option, is what's my framework for asking myself? And the question for me is very often when I look back at the end of my life, will I think I should have gone down path A or to path B? Again, to Justin's point and Drew's point and everyone's point, man, I screw this up all the time. I really do. So I'm never batting 1,000. And the reality is none of us will ever bat 1,000. My goal is, to Justin's point, am I getting better? Am I a little bit better at it now than I was yesterday? That's what's worked for me.
Before Justin jumps in, when I help fathers, I tell them a mistake is a moment. It's not a person.
Yeah.
So it's just a moment in time. Yeah. It's not a person. So fully hear you on that. And just want to jump in before Justin. Go ahead.
I'll just throw one more thing out. Justin and Paul will recognize this. We all had the same coach who would basically reiterate this message throughout the year. What if we all just got 1% better every single day?
Yeah.
How much better collectively would we be by the end of the season? So, point, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I just want to jump in too. I just encourage fathers, just be a better human. Do whatever you can to be a better human, and just spread love wherever you can, especially to your kids. So go ahead, Justin.
Well, and just on this, and I saw a question come in terms of the reflection period and the time. It's a question from Neil. It's like, it's a great question because, you know, when do we do this? Do we reflect at the end of the year and look back at all the mistakes I made? I mean, first of all, recognize that we're all going to make mistakes. That's just a part of reality. You know, my brother-in-law, I've got the trails hat here. You know, the running line in mountain biking is if you're not falling, you're not trying, right? So the whole point of that sport, and I imagine skiing and skating, like a lot of other sports, are like that. You know, obviously your mistake hopefully isn't going over the edge of the Grand Canyon. Your mistake is falling off in the trails, right? So there's a balance for sure. But the reality is you have to recognize that if you are out in the world and you are aiming, you know, to be a great dad and hopefully to be a great husband and to be great at whatever you've chosen to do for your vocation, and you want to be a great friend and a great brother and a great son. I mean, I imagine everyone listening is probably trying to do well in all those things. You cannot be out in the world diving into those things and not make mistakes. But you just have to recognize that so that when it does happen, again, we go back to the selective amnesia, this idea of, you know, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to reflect upon it, learn. To Neil's question on the timing, I think it depends on the individual in your life. I think the earlier you can do it, the better. So I think in the moment, it's like, man, you know, how am I feeling? Because what happens, and everybody, I mean, I'll be quite candid. I hopefully Drew and Justin don't struggle with this as much, but they may. When I'm mad at myself, I can get pretty toxic, and I can sort of, you know, we all have the capacity to take others down with us. Like now I'm in a bad mood. Now my day's going, you know what I mean? So now I'm just going to walk around and my kids are like, okay, watch out. Bodacious nipples in the living room, right? Like, and I'm just looking for targets to hit, you know? So we all need to get, you know, myself certainly at the top of that list, need to improve on the ability to take the mistake that you made, have the quick, it sounds so cliche, but have that quick self-talk. Okay, what am I doing here? Okay, do I have time to deep dive in this? No. Okay, get on to the next moment, make this work, figure it out. I'm going to reflect upon it later. And to Neil's question, I try to journal a few times every week. You know, I don't usually hit 7 days, but usually, you know, 5 or 6. It's just a chance to be quiet in the morning, think back a little bit to who I want to be, what kind of human I want to be, write a thought or two down. If you're not journaling it, these phones are great. Jot it down in your phone. I always have paper on my desk. Like, just write yourself a little note or whatever it is to remember that moment, the lesson that you learned from it, so you can move on from it.
Finally, we're going to get to Justin. Okay.
Oh,
Thanks for your patience.
Hey, I'm just a sponge right now. I'm learning lots of great things and gathering some valuable nuggets of wisdom. Two jump out. And what I would share with everyone here is that winning is a feeling, right? So I'm all about how can I create that winning feeling as much as I can in my life, right? More. And I think of two wins this week. One, the day before school. Like Paul was mentioning, I can also be very laser focused. When I want something, I just want to go do it. If I want to go do stuff for my business, I want to go do that. If I want to go have a conversation, I want to go do that. So there was this time where my daughter was getting ready for bed. She wanted to read to me. And I felt myself that wants to get laser focused on work kick in. And then literally I was stepping out the door and I literally paused. And I thought, almost like Paul had mentioned, what would my 85-year-old self really want? And then I went and laid in bed with her and she read to me. Right. And just that. So just that ability to create that was huge. Just creating that moment just to focus on what I do want. Another one happened this morning. With kids going back to school, our routine has changed. My kids haven't been in a physical classroom since 2020 of January. So now setting the intention that when they get up at 7:30, the stuff that I'm doing work-wise, and I'm an early riser, done. From that 7:30 to 8:30 till they get on the bus, it's about them. It's about setting them for their day. So I found just those little opportunities to sort of create a shift of my old conditioning back to who I want to be has been huge. And I celebrate those, right? Like a win isn't big. It's not small. It's only in our mind. We make it so. So, I'm all about creating that winning feeling.
I want to pick up on something you just shared, Justin, have all of you contribute. Share with our fathers and those who love them how important it is to celebrate those wins, no matter how big or how small they are, celebrating the wins and how that helps your balance in life. Who want to touch on that first?
I'll share. It's you can focus on one of two things in life, your barriers or your blessings. Blessings are going to lead to the life you want to live. So what I try to do is to, as much as I can, I don't get it right 100% of the time, spend as much of my day focused on my blessings. And I find when I do that, I typically have better days.
Cool. Who wants to jump in next?
Yeah, as a follow-up on Justin's, I think there's many variations of the saying. It's, where your focus goes, energy flows, those types of things, right? And so what Justin's talking about there is, I'm in traffic and I've got, a delay and I can focus on the fact that, man, I'm getting delayed, or I can just be like, you know what, maybe this is keeping me from, an important, maybe I can look at it negatively or I can look at it positively. And I think, if you focus on the negative things, you're absolutely going to grow angst and upset, all these other things. And so it's not to be overly simplistic, but there are ways you can find opportunities. And the example I'll use for this is personally, March 12th, 2020, we basically said, hey, the world's going to shut down. We're probably going to see things go crazy in the next week. And it literally changed day by day. On March 16th, I sat down and I said, okay, I have no control over any of this stuff, right? Whether I can leave my house or not, what I'm going to have to but I sat down, I said, what are the opportunities now that I'm going to be at home, now that I'm going to be, confined, I'm going to have maybe more time because I won't be doing some of these other things. What does this create for me? Right? Everyone was focusing on the craziness. What the hell is this going to mean? Am I going to lose it? I don't know why. I just chose to say, what's the opportunity for me in this? And so that's how I got through the first sort of month and 2 and 3 and with no real ideas. I focused on the opportunities I could create or that I wanted to focus on creating through this period of time, which I had no control over. And so, anyways, just I'll add to that to Justin's point.
Oh. Yeah, and I think, Ed, if I hear you correctly, the question is, how do we share sort of our victories with our family? Is that right? When we sort of have those?
Yeah, well, yeah, either your own personally, because I think what you emulate your kids are going to replicate. So just sharing with fathers and those who love them, the importance of sharing those wins. Like for you, I know that you probably feel great after a workout.
Yeah.
Most of the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can relate.
Sure.
Sometimes I don't feel great after a workout. I just say, get me to the shower. Right.
Yeah.
But just celebrating those wins as a dad, how important it can be to your kids and your family.
Totally. No, I think it's a great question. I think you're right. And so you've given a great example. I mean, to me, it's inviting them to join in to some of the things that I do. I don't know what Justin's, the age of your kids are, or everyone else sort of who's listening. The reality is we go through phases. And so when your kids are really young, they're very dependent upon you, and they're just looking to you to provide, sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sort of their basic needs. Then you go through what I would say I'm in right now is this amazing sweet spot where my kids have a really, really high, between 4 and 12. They're really, really interested in me, and they're able to do lots of things, and they haven't gotten too cool for me yet. And I know from talking to friends, at some point in time, they're not going to want to spend their spare time with me. And so I remind myself of that all the time. It's like this is a separate issue, but it's related. Obviously, I think we have sort of our framework wrong. I think everyone works really hard and ignores their family. And then they're 60 and then they say, great, now I'm retired or whatever. And I can spend time with your family. I'm like, well, guess what? Your family doesn't, care about you anymore. Like your kids aren't around. And so you missed out in the 20 years when they were really interested in you. Right. And obviously those are two extremes. And so I always think, I can work really hard in my 60s, hopefully I'm healthy and I'm able to and all that sort of stuff. My kids won't be living at home. They won't be that interested. They're really interested in me right now. So all that to say, my kids know I love to exercise, and they know why, because I talk to them about it and I let them know. I was like, do you guys know why I like to exercise? They're like, oh, and I explain, like, I love the joy. I like movement. I like what it does for me in terms of how I feel afterwards. Come do something with me. And I do a lot of fun stuff, right? Come pull a tire with me. Come do this. You do whatever you want. Let's go for a hike in the woods, or, so they're sharing in that. After my bike rides, I'm very social. So after I go for a bike ride, I'll have people over for a coffee. My kids are there. They're just understanding sort of, hopefully, the seeds that I'm trying to plant are this idea that go and enjoy life, appreciate nature around you. These are my personal values. I'm not saying everyone has to follow them. I just mean, to your point, Ed, sharing that with them. The flip side of it, though, is something that I've wrestled with, and where I've landed today is as follows. I share my failings with them too. I actually want them to understand when I make mistakes, and I want them to know that their dad is far from perfect, and I want them to see how I respond to it. So if I lose my temper at my kids, if I'm short with them, they respond emotionally if they see that I'm in a bad mood or I'm angry or whatever. I always try to circle back and say, hold on, let's have a little chat about this. All right. So I was short with you earlier. I raised my voice with you. Here's what was going on. What do you think was, and I want them to start to develop the skill set to observe other people's emotions and recognize what's going on. Because I think that skill set's going to serve them really well, right? If they now know that when their boss walks by them in the hallway and doesn't say anything, it may not have anything to do with them. It might just be their boss had a tough call with his wife, or whatever the case may be, right? So I want them to start paying attention that the world doesn't revolve around them. And so start to read. So sometimes I'll be like, hey, I was short with you because I just got off the phone. It was a tough call and I was late. That's why I was short with you, today in the kitchen. At the same time, I want them to actually understand reflection, what we talked about earlier. So I'll sit down with them and I'll say, look, I was rude to you earlier, and I did that because, I was short fused or whatever the case may be. I made this mistake. But what I want to do is I want to own that. And I'm coming back and I'm letting you know, what I said to you was correct. You should have listened to your mom and done what I told you to do earlier. And you should have put your shoes on earlier. But the way in which I said it was wrong. I let my bad day influence how I communicated. And that's on me. And, as your dad, I'm going to work on that and I'll do a better job. We have a swear jar in our house, which I donate to a lot. And, that's sort of part of it,
next time you're on, we want to see you at jar.
Yeah, no. I need it to get down. So here's the only rule with the swear jar, which you'll appreciate. The only rule with the swear jar, it's dad who's contributing to it. My kids are really, unfortunately, they're becoming quite wily, as Dr. Evil would say. They're quite wily. They now know how to do things to make me swear. And so I literally walked through my living room the other day. There's like a loft area upstairs. And as I walked through, sort of to your point, Justin, if you're very focused, I was literally laser beam, and they launched the most massive, couch cushion onto my head, and it hit me. And I just said, mother, of all things, for the love of, it was like a scene. My wife said it was like a scene from Jackass, as I'm literally like this focused dad gets just, T-boned from this couch from like 20 feet up.
Oh my goodness.
And I just let the expletives fly sort of thing. And they were like, oh, we got so much money in the swear jar. I was like, you don't get a thing in the swear jar, guys. I was like, you caused it. So anyway, all that to say, though, this part of the swear jar is there's a consequence to my mistakes, right? When I use language I shouldn't use, there's a consequence to it. And that's a theme. So, to your point, yes, I think we share in the victories, and let us having a good day at work or us having a good workout or what that be a family win. Because if all of a sudden it's, and there's a little way, hey guys, I had a great day at work. You know what? Dinner's on me tonight. We're going to go out to whatever, pizza, whatever it is. Right. It's really fun to do that. My mother-in-law said this to me a long time ago. She says, life is filled with so many tough moments. You really have to celebrate the good ones. Absolutely. So I think it's a good way to think about it. And again, sharing them your mistakes and verbalize the lessons that you learned. So hopefully they'll learn lessons from your mistakes as they go along.
Drew, anything you want to add as we start winding it down?
I'll just reinforce the two things that kind of Paul finished off with is you have to be intentional on celebrating the wins, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing like, oh, we're all going to go out to dinner, or we're going to do crazy, we're going to Disney. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be literally in the moment, taking 5 minutes to acknowledge and appreciate. Again, back to those 3 A's, as well as having what Paul shared there. We're laughing because it's fun. We can envision that. And yes, it's around this idea of the swear jar, but the kids were going, like, you can still have fun with that. And that even having fun is a way to create wins, we'll say. So, with my kids, the little thing that I do is, it's not even more of a win. It's like when I engage with them or when you see them, and if they're starting to get off a little bit, I say, hey, how many hugs do you guys need a day? And they give me the wrong answer. Yeah. What?
There you go.
Wrong answer.
Live example. There you go.
It's the wrong answer because it's 12. And that's from research. So you need 12 on a day. And so it becomes, I chase them, and they get pickled. And it becomes a way to celebrate just this moment, this way to connect this relationship that we have, as well as, quite frankly, every now and then it's great because it turns them around out of like they need laughter to sort of get pulled out of some of the other stuff. And so, little things like that are ways, but to celebrate, you have to be intentional and have fun with it.
Good stuff. Anyone want to add before we start winding it down?
Okay. Yeah, the only thing I would just add to just what we discussed, just because I made a note of it, when we talked earlier about, and this ties into, sharing the wins and the intentionality and the time with our spouse, and everyone sort of has their versions in terms of, a date set or the 3 A's or whatever. Something that I've learned the hard way for sure is men are notorious for guessing incorrectly as to what their wife wants. So why set our, So the only thing worse than sort of missing the mark with respect to sort of meeting your spouse's needs is thinking you met someone's needs and missing the mark, because now it's a double disappointment. They're disappointed their needs weren't met, and I'm disappointed that I put an effort forward they didn't like, right? So it's sort of like, we all get that. And so what I've learned, and I'm not great at it, but hopefully getting better, is I try to take the guessing out of it. So ask my wife point blank, like, hey, what do you need today? Or what, and the reality is what I would have guessed may have not been the same, because I've learned that but didn't you see what I did? And she's like, what? Oh yeah, thanks. But that wasn't even important. That was 8 rungs down on the ladder. What I actually really wanted you to do today was the following. And I'm like, what? That's what you wanted? Okay. And so you got to get good bang for buck in terms of if you're going to put this investment into your relationships. And it's really simple. I mean, so I say this to clients all the time. I'm like, we don't have to guess. You don't need to. You can just ask someone, what do you need? What do you want right now? What matters most? What matters most to you today? If we look back at the end of the day and you look back on this day, what thing do you want done? What way can I help you the most? And again, I don't ask that all that often. I'm not very good at it, but when I do, you get much better results than these are the things I'm going to do today for my spouse or for my kids.
Justin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. I thought, of what Drew was talking about earlier about integration. I thought of what Paul was talking about. about this idea of how can we bring together the family, right? Create it, not just a me win, but this is a family win, right? I even thought about what you were talking about, Ed, about more is caught than taught. And I thought back to even something as simple of this idea of create a culture of joy, right? And why I love that word joy, and what I share with my clients, this is like, what brings a smile to your face? Like, what makes you feel alive, right? Who do you love spending time with? And I find that when you ask yourself and prompt that, right? And again, there's that power of question, reflection, and that when you can bring more parts of your life in together, that's where the magic happens. I think back to, on Monday, on Labor Day, my wife and I took our daughter down to the beaches here in Toronto. We just went out and just explored the beaches. Then we stopped for an impromptu dinner date, right? My son preferred to spend time with grandma so he could go play basketball with his friends. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's allowing, each to define, sort of build that culture of joy in the family unit, but then also giving some autonomy for people to choose what their joy is. And I find when you do that, and hey, this is something that I've had to work on. This is not, let me just say, it's a lot of intentional reps and sets for me to get to this point. But I find that as you do it, it's just, there's more harmony within the family. And I find when, I'm strong, my relationship with my wife is strong, then our kids are strong, and it's different, right? So I share that. So yeah, create a culture of joy. What is that thing that you love to do? What brings a smile to your face? Who do you love to spend time with?
Okay. Well, we're going to close it out. So what I'm looking to get from yourself, Paul, and Justin, is any closing thoughts? And if you're comfortable, share your information where people can, if they want to, further contact you. So I'll go with Paul first. Any final thoughts and where people can contact you?
Yeah, I'd say if there's one sort of big takeaway, it's just this idea that life is a sailboat, not a motorboat. That's just the framework. It's a principle that I can apply in a practical level in any way. So I, perpetually recognize that wherever you are, you need to assess where you're at relative to where you want to go, and then ask yourself, what do I need to adapt to get to where I want to go? So that has really helped me Drew's heard me say this before, but my big 3 F's are family, fitness, and finance, right? So my job, my health, my relationships. In all those things, just trying to look at that. So, as far as where to reach me, I'm not on social media.
Okay.
I don't do all that stuff, but if anyone wants to reach out or has further questions, I've got a talk online on work-life balance. You just look up my name on YouTube and work-life balance. I sort of cover my views on that. Happy for people to watch that. I do this Game 7 challenge thing. So anyone who wants to reach out or learn more can just reach Drew. I think everyone knows how to reach Drew, and anyone who wants to get connected with me can do that through Drew. Happy to help. And thanks for everyone for listening today. And thank you, Ed, for your job moderating. And
no, this is easy. I just steered the ship. You guys drove it, man. You were fantastic.
So thank you for that. And, I was just thinking as I was listening to Justin, I sort of, writing down when I hear from Justin and from Drew, I appreciate that I was asked to come on today to share my experience, and this is not just trying to sound cliche at the end here. It focuses, being asked these questions makes me always have to think, what's my why? Why am I doing this? Why did I do that? Right. So you've said this a few times today, Justin, the power of questions. I couldn't agree more. So for everyone out there, don't be afraid to ask yourself the questions. These questions were asked of us today on the panel, not because we have the answers per se, but because we're taking the time to try to come to the answer. And so for anyone listening, ask yourself some of these questions that Ed just asked, because I can tell you, as a guy who just sat through it for an hour, there's tremendous value in just asking yourself some of these tough questions. How am I doing right now in balance? What is balance to me? What are some, mistakes I've made? What are some good lessons that I've learned? And Drew, Justin, I've learned a lot just from listening to you guys today. So I think that's the whole point, I think, of why you guys are here, which is to share experiences with each other, because no one has all the answers, but hopefully collectively we can learn a little bit more and be, as you guys would say, a little better now than we were an hour ago. So I feel grateful for that. So thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Justin.
Yeah. I would encourage everyone to, ask yourself that question. The last question I talked about, like, what brings you joy? Like, what makes you just feel alive? Who do you love to spend time with? And really allow yourself to just take a moment and just see what comes up. You can write some stuff down, and then take one of those today and do more of it, right? Take focused action. And how people can get connected with me, I'm on social. Probably the easiest way to connect with me is a few months ago, I did release a book called You Are Greatness. So if you go to the site, so it's www.youaregreatnessbook.com. It has all my social media handles at the bottom of it. For anyone that, sort of loves some of these simple ideas, they can download a free chapter of the book, a sample of the book. They can take a look at it and there. But that's probably the easiest way to connect with me is just go to that webpage, and all the social media handles are right there.
Drew, do you want me to go before you, or do you want to go for me? No, me first. Okay.
Okay.
All right. No problem.
You're going to have to close this out. So.
Okay. No problem. Go ahead, Drew.
All I have to say is thank you so much to Paul and to Justin for coming on today and for sharing your insights with our audience. Certainly I learned, as I always do, from this, and the value that as a father, sitting down with other dads and talking, and as you said, asking these questions and hearing the answers from, I always find so valuable. And so I encourage dads, if there's anything you can do, get in contact with other dads and just every now and then have a conversation or just do something together and chat about these things, because there's tremendous value that comes from hearing each other's story, if nothing else. So thank you so much to both of you. And Ed, as always, honored and privileged to be able to have your support and your involvement in Dad Central and the work that you do for us. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you to each one of you for being honest and being true to yourselves and admitting that, hey, you just work at getting a little bit better each day. And that's what it's all about. And your wisdom and your knowledge and your evaluated experiences, I think, will be glistened onto other people who watch this live, who watch it on replay. I think it's just an incredible thing. I will add some real quick things for fathers who want to get this balance thing better, because you never get it 100% right. I say communication. Communicate with your family. Another thing, your calendar is your boss. So stick to that calendar. Make sure you have that dedicated time that, hey, is family time. If you're working from home, create a dedicated workplace. So the family knows when you're in this area, it's work time. And then finally, set your boundaries. Don't let work control you. You control your work. So when you're finished that day of work, whether you're at home or workplace, you've turned out the lights, not only physically, but mentally. You've turned those lights off. So for more information and more great conversation like this, please go to our website, www.dadcentral.ca. You'll see great free information on a lot of great dad topics. And we're looking forward to seeing you next month. And for those who have the young ones going back to school, please be safe and make sure you, as a father, you give yourself and your family, give yourselves grace. It's part of the process. And remember to take those breaks. It's very important. Take care, everybody. Thanks very much for your time. Be well. Keep the faith. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.